Hello everyone, today we are here at Nottingham College with our guest Jared Wilson, talking to him about his journalism career and his involvement in LeftLion Magazine. Hi Jared.
Hello.
It's lovely to have you. So we're going to start where it all began. How did you first get into journalism?
Well, I always liked writing when I was at school. So I guess that was the start of it. And then the first time I ever had anything published was in a Notts County fanzine. So I was probably about 14 or 15 when that happened. And then I got involved in the university magazine. When I was at uni, that was where it really started. I started writing for that and became a sub-editor and eventually the editor of that. And it all kind of started from there.
That's really cool. So clearly you've done work in the past, and how does that differ from what you do at the LeftLion now, and which would you say you prefer?
So, well, in terms of writing for other people, I've not written for other publications for quite a while actually, but back in the day after uni, I was in London for a bit. I wrote for Guardian, The Independent, quite a few others like that. One of the truths of that time was I was, although I was writing at these big papers, I was struggling to afford to live there because the cost of it was quite high. And then I returned back to Nottingham, and that was around the time we founded LeftLion. I really enjoy writing for LeftLion now, and the kind of the lens that we have of Nottingham culture and knowing, I guess, so much about this city I was born and brought up in.
Would you say that's why you're so passionate about the city, because you grew up here?
I think so, but obviously you become more passionate over time. I mean, the fact that you can running a magazine in Nottingham over 22 years, which is how long we've been doing it now. Then you take on board a lot of knowledge, a lot of trivia. Because when we first started out, I think the reason that we did it was that there was not really at that time. And bear in mind, this was the early days of the internet as well. There wasn't really anything that felt like it was covering the stuff that we were interested in. So you still had BBC Nottingham, and you had the Nottingham Post, which is Notts Live now. But they were the only kind of media sources. And there were a lot of things that we were interested in, live music, bands, trivia, all this stuff that was going on, a bit of more counterculture stuff. And there just didn't seem to be anything covering those things. So I think that's why we started really, and then we did. There was maybe a few articles that we did early on that blew up. That if they hadn't have done, then we might not be here today.
That's incredible. So you mentioned that you've been going for over 20 years now. How has the production process sort of changed as the media landscape has?
Oh well. So firstly, we started out as a website. I mean, I think 22 years ago, we were probably quite high tech. So we were a website for a year, and then we thought there might be demand for a printed product. And we printed our first issue in September 2003. 2004, September 2004. The website launched in September 2003. So there's been a lot of changes. I mean, the production process of the magazine maybe hasn't changed as much as you'd think, because so the way our magazine's printed, we print in 15,000 copies a month now. And the way it's printed is in big industrial printers outside of Nottingham, basically. That machinery hasn't changed as much as you might think it has. But I think the landscape of media has changed dramatically. So, obviously we existed before Twitter, I think before Facebook. And, we had Google then, and there were web forums, which your lecturer, Matt, will remember because he was posting on them many years ago. So that was the landscape of it then. There was no real social media. I mean, MySpace was launched during the life of LeftLion. So I think, our core product, we're print first, and our core product is our magazine. But there's been a lot of changes in digital media, certainly. And, our website's been upgraded various times and through different content management systems and things. And we've obviously seen the rise in media of, social media, of influencers, and I think they all bring, new things, new merits. I mean, media is probably more democratic than it ever has been, which I think is a really good thing. And in many ways, I think there's probably less jobs in written journalism than there has been, but there's probably more jobs in media as a whole because of the rise of of social media and the fact that you can kind of become famous from your bedroom.
So throughout your extensive journalism career, you've completed many different projects. Which one's been your favourite?
Oh, there's been a few. So yeah, we've done a lot of, obviously there's been lots of magazines. We're on issue 188 this month. But I guess that question's more about projects on the side. So in 2017, we did a project studying a guy called Herbert Kilpin, funny name. He was born in the 1800s and grew up on Mansfield Road. He was a butcher's son. And then as part of the lace trade, he got shipped to Italy. And he went over to work in Italy. And this is where it gets interesting because he was one of the pioneers of football. So he played football here at a time when Italy didn't really have football as it is now, or calcio as they call it. And he ended up founding a team there, which was basically a load of his mates from the lace industry in Italy. And that team is now AC Milan. So this massive Italian team that, Beckham's played for, that so many famous players have played for. And that was really interesting project to get on board with because we ended up taking a film crew to Milan. We ended up working with some pretty famous footballers, some that were in our film and some that weren't. But we ended up winning a couple of awards in Italy. The film ended up being shown in China, so I ended up travelling China, and it's still shown at that out there, which is, funny, really. So that was a really interesting project. It was on many levels. One, it definitely tapped into the interest that I have in local history, which I think for me at school and when I was studying, I wasn't that bothered about history, but I think history becomes meaningful and interesting when it's relevant to you. So the reason that was interesting to me is as a lad born in Sherwood, I walked past this place that the founder of AC Milan was born twice a day and never realised it for a long time, and then was like, what, that place? And to realise this and the kind of butterfly effect of a pioneer like that was really interesting. And we kind of rode on the coattails of an author called Robert Nieri who was writing a book about it. So I became good mates with him, and we ended up making a film with him and with others. Doing a lot of discovery about kind of how Nottingham could be considered as the birthplace of Italian football. Because as well as the AC Milan links with Herbert Kilpin, who just founded the club, and it's in all of their DNA. So they're called AC Milan, but if you're Italian, then Milan is called Milano. But Italians call it AC Milan because it's the English way of saying Milan. So that's in their DNA all the way through. But then you've also got a guy called Tom Savage who was mates with Herbert Kilpin. And we found, during the film, we found a photo of them together. And he was a Nottingham guy who also went over there as part of the lace trade and ended up getting Notts County to send shirts to Juventus. So Juventus at that time were playing in pink, and they received a batch of Notts County's kit, and from then on they wore the black and white stripes. So and this to me is, I have a love-hate relationship with football really, because I'm not into the Premier League. I don't really watch it. I think it's full of giant man babies, But at the same time, the roots of football, that idea of of these Nottingham pioneers doing this thing that years later can become part of a global consciousness is really interesting to me.
Thank you. So in the Left Line, you have a column about city spots, and obviously we know you love Nottingham. What's your favourite city spot?
Oh, that's a good question, isn't it? I can name a few, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Woodthorpe Park in Sherwood. Like, growing up, that park meant a lot to me. I spent a lot of time there, riding my bike, kicking footballs around, meeting friends, doing all the things that young people do. I think nowadays I live the other side of the river, and I recently, I'd spent a lot of time with my children in Bridgeford Park, and I recently got married in the place there. So obviously that holds quite a few special memories now. But I guess ultimately the LeftLion, right? In the name of our company, which I think a lot of people think it's a political thing, and it's not. You know, we're probably quite liberal people, but really, the LeftLion, when I was a youngster, then bear in mind this was before mobile phones were widespread, certainly, we had to meet at the Lions. That's how we met our mates in town. So basically, we'd always go meet you at the LeftLion at this time, and then, you know, you'd meet him there. And I think the reason we met at the LeftLion rather than the right one, and it's, to us, it's the left one as you look at it, okay, as you're facing the council house, was really because there was a phone box nearby and because there was a road near the right one that made it kind of like a bit more dangerous to stand by it. So yeah, the LeftLion, I think, you know.
So if you were to go back to stage one of creating a Nottingham-based magazine, would you do anything differently?
Yeah, God, we do loads different, I think. I mean, you learn as you go along and you make it up. So for us, firstly, like, we've been going 23 years, but this has only been a job for me, like a proper job where I, you know, don't have to do another job as well for maybe a decade. And, you know, we were printing quite a lot of magazines back then, but we were just kind of, it was like a hobby that got out of hand, you know, getting 8,000, it was 8,000 copies back then, getting them delivered and lugging them up the stairs of a flat in Carrington to take them out on weekends. And then obviously there's a lot of changes in technology since. So to be honest, you know, if you look at, we built a website early on. Like the first thing we ever did that we put online on the 1st of September 2003 was a website. And it was mainly full of my articles about Nottingham. And then as it went on, other writers joined us and it started to be more of a community of writers. Nowadays, honestly, that might have just ended up being a Substack. You know, my business partner in it is a web developer and quite a high-end one and does lots of things that you wouldn't necessarily know that we'd do. But nowadays, you can do a lot of that yourself, really. So I think the journey would definitely have been quite different. That's not to say I regret any of it, but I think, you know, if there's a lot more tools nowadays for people to use, there's a lot more there for you. But there's still, the thing that hasn't changed is there's still the stories, you know. I mean, a key thing for us has always been that a great LeftLion story is a thing that you and your friends, you know, it's something in Nottingham that you and your friends are all talking about, but it's not necessarily been put in the Post or in the BBC, you know. And that's what really makes a great LeftLion story, I think. And you know, social media makes it easy to find them now as well.
So looking back on your highly successful career, what would be the one piece of advice you would give to those trying to break into the journalism world?
Well, number one, you've got to do this because you enjoy doing it and you're passionate about it. And I think that, you know, if you're orientated around money and things, this probably isn't the right career for you. Number two, I'd say, you know, be inquisitive. Basically, I think you've got to be a journalist anyway. Be inquisitive, look at what's around you, you know, pull on little threads of stories to find the next bit, and, you know, you never know where the journey might take you. I think, you know, on a more solemn note, like, manage your expectations, because I think the truth is now that there's more in Nottingham, there'll be more people working in PR than there are in paid journalism roles, you know, and that's true. And I think it's a bit sad, but I think that is the truth. And a lot of the finance of media goes to massive companies like Facebook and Google. So that has a knock-on effect. And that's why you're seeing like the rise of AI written journalism now, even in local publications, not us, but even in local publications, there's a lot more robots writing articles. But I think, you know, there's good careers out there and definitely good life opportunities for people. But, you know, there's also a lot of journalism graduates are probably going to look at other pathways, you know, into PR and all those other things, really. Yeah.
Well, thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk to us. It's been a pleasure. Join us next week for our Halloween special.